So, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Uh, if you are listening on LinkedIn Live, if you're watching the recording, welcome to this edition of Lunch and Learn. As you know, what we've been trying to do is to get different perspectives from different parts of the SAP ecosystem to try and understand what it takes for SAP customers, which is Index members, to drive digital transformation in your organization in particular and in general drive innovation in your organization. Today, we are happy to host Mr. Manish Choksi, Vice Chairman of Asian Paints and erstwhile Chairman of Indus as well. And we will talk about a lot of things, including digital transformation and probably the emerging role of the CIO from his perspective. And let's see how this conversation progresses. So thanks a lot, Manish, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mukesh, and thanks to SAP and Indus for providing this platform to share my learnings, my thoughts on, I think, an ever-evolving journey of an animal called CIO and the digital journey, which has now become so omnipresent everywhere.
Yeah, with the COVID pandemic, I think it has catapulted the role of the CIO right front and center of all organizations, and digital becoming one of the key pillars around which organizations were able to ride the wave of COVID as well. So that makes it all that more, I would say, impactful. And also, in a way, the business now understands the potential of digital that can bring to their respective organizations as well, right? So with that, let's start with the emerging role of a CIO itself. So you've been a CIO, now you're vice chairman of an organization. So you have seen both from as day-to-day operations of a CIO as well, and today with your current position, you also see probably at a higher level what's happening in the industry. And we would like to understand what your perspective is along the lines of, how is the role of a CIO emerging as you see it?
So I think before we, Mukesh, jump to the evolving role of the CIO or Chief Digital Officer, or for that matter, even the role of the CEO and the board, I think we need to probably reflect back that I think the digital transformation journey that was prior to the pandemic was taking place at a certain pace. And what I think the pandemic has really brought to fore is the fact that it has accelerated the requirement for organizations to sort of implement their digital journeys in probably a more accelerated manner, and in a manner where it will have a very, very significant impact on the business. Clearly, as we began the pandemic and across the world, most businesses saw disruptions in the way they thought that they could conduct businesses. And I think it was very clear in maybe the first 15 days to a month, depending on which country you were at, on the fact that if you had planned to be a little more digital, maybe your employees could work from home much easier, maybe teams could collaborate much better. And most of all, you would be able to interact with your customers or your partners, as the case may be, and business would run. Obviously, if you are a physical brick and mortar business, like a lot of the businesses there, then you will have to produce goods in your factory. But for some businesses, the goods are actually services that they produce in their offices, and those could pretty much effectively operate from anywhere. So I think the pandemic completely changed the paradigm, that it was not as if an organization could choose whether it went on this digital journey or not. It became apparent to everybody that it had to go on the journey. The question is how, at what pace, and what would each organization do? So I think that is the most important context that I would like to bring to the fore for any organization, whether you are large, whether you are mid-size, or for that matter, small or a startup. Making sure that you have some sort of a digital agenda in terms of what you want to do, I think has become super critical for today.
So does that mean, so who owns this agenda? Is that the CIO who owns it, or the CEO who owns it, or
so I think partially I would answer the question sitting now at a vantage situation of the board. I would say that the CEO and the board, need to be able to own this agenda. Obviously, the CEO more, the board would play a support role. And of course, the rest of the people who report into the CEO, including the CIO, would become sort of partners with the CEO in this agenda in some sense of word. So the agenda has to be owned at the apex, must be supported by a fairly good understanding by the board on what it takes for the company to make this transformation happen. Help the CEO get the right funding, maybe even recruit the right people in case you don't have the right talent, and obviously change the way processes are scripted so that you can take advantage of digital technology to improve business in some sense or transform business in some sense. So I think I would say it's clearly the CEO mandate as of today. Maybe I would say that an active sort of change maker, could be the chief digital officer, chief information officer, but clearly the agenda must be owned by the CEO and the business.
So that actually gives us the segue to talk about the emerging role of a CIO or a CDO as well, right? So what do you think is the role emerging into, and what are some
I think Mukesh, if you go back and look at the first objective of any change is to be able to sort of understand the context in which you're going to make it. So the first thing I think the CIO's role is going to be is that if he or she is the epicenter of all implementation, and maybe in many organizations also the focus of the lot of input that is coming from the technology world into the company, then I think you need to be able to get out to the board, to the CEO and the business heads, and make sure that they understand the kind of implementation you're going to get into, the kind of transformation that you can get to do, but more importantly, what are the opportunities available out there, who could be potential partners, etc. So I think the first mandate of any CIO, and if you want to, is to reskill themselves in being able to educate their peers, the CEO and the board on the opportunities that is there. That is not to say that the board and the CEO don't get this information from other sources in that sense, and they themselves, I'm sure, are sort of looking at these matters. But I think if there was a fulcrum in the company and if there were shoulders in the company on which this entire mandate set, I would say that it would be that of the CIO and CDO. I think in this context, I think the first thing is for you to be able to sort of impress upon the CEO that you need to have a seat at least the apex management table. For companies that are even larger and have an even bigger mandate, maybe the CIO could become even a potential board member, though I think that would be a bit rare. But a seat at the apex management table, call it the management board, call it steering com, whatever every organization calls its apex management as with different names and different titles. But I think the first thing one needs to get is the seat at the table. The second thing is this whole role on how change in the world is going to impact the company, impact its stakeholders, etc. And I think being the funnel of that information into the company, what is relevant, what is not, I think that's clearly a huge mandate. And these two things are, Mukesh, I think a big change from the past, where sometimes the CIOs reported into the ops head, sometimes to the CFO's office in some sense of word. But considering the kind of digital disruption we see out there today, clearly the CIO is going to have to report to the CEO and or the business heads, depending on the kind of transformation initiatives you're going to run. So I think that's really the biggest change that you're going to see out there. The context has changed completely. I think from this context, the next context is that of becoming sort of the chief alignment master along with the CEO. I think obviously the CEO's key role is not only to carve out the digital transformation agenda, which is done by various teams, but to make sure that everybody in the company is aligned on that. the back office, the front office, the business teams, and including the board. I think the CIO's job earlier used to be getting alignment on projects. Now it is almost getting alignment on a 2-3 year journey that you're going to have to take in many cases for larger organizations. And for smaller organizations, sometimes this is a very big journey, even though it might be shorter because they probably never attempted anything like this in the past. So I think from that perspective, alignment is the next big role. I think in the past, most people would say that, hey, you know what? The job of hiring talent is that of HR. I think here the CIO and CDO role is going to change dramatically. If you will need top talent, so to speak, and for whatever reason your company does not have the right talent to go on this journey, then the CIO and CDO's role is going to become the chief tech magnet, if you want to call it, and be able to make sure that from the right resources from within the company who want to work on digital transformation initiatives to drawing out talent from the external world that you might need to complete your projects, or for that matter, working with what shall you say, individual consultants, sometimes the people who freelancers, for lack of better words, whom you may need because to bring into critical roles, because these people do not like to work for a company, so to speak. They make their living being almost digital nomads in some sense of the word, but provide very expert sort of talent or expert sort of resources into the company. So I think you've got to become a magnet for this whole talent that you will require to drive these initiatives. And I think the yesteryear-old of doing trade-offs between business and technology and making sure that you have the right business case, obviously that is par for the course. That you will have to definitely do. And obviously, not only do you need to drive literacy with the technical literacy with the CEO and the board, but you'll have to drive it across the company also, in some sense of it. So you become like a chief spokesperson for the digital initiatives within the company. So one, you are the aligner. Two, you are the magnet who draws the talent. Make sure that you make the business case. And four, obviously, you need to drive and rally the troops so that they understand the impact of these initiatives and you can get support from them. So all of these things is going to be there. It's just that maybe the better CIOs did it in the past. Now, pretty much the mandate is that everybody is going to have to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get replaced by a chief digital officer. So in that sense of the word, so I'm saying either the CIO becomes a chief digital officer, or I guess what, the company is going to go find the right talent to lead these digital initiatives and redesignate the CIO as somebody who manages infrastructure, manages the legacy applications, and somebody will drive the new change initiative. So that would be a bit of a lost opportunity for CIOs. And I would say that I would not say it's relatively easy to do the agenda that I've outlined, but at some stage, you will have to do this to be able to sort of make sure that you are relevant in this new digital world.
Yeah, I mean, based on whatever you've just said, I think it's a big step up for majority of the CIOs in terms of both span, in terms of the kind of influence that they can have on the organization, as well as the depth in terms of how deep they will need to go within the organization in order for them to do their jobs really well. And I think a lot of CIOs are trying to do something similar, but not a lot of them are able to succeed for various reasons. One of the challenges that I continuously hear from CIOs is that they want to have a seat at the table, but are not able to get a seat at the table for whatever reasons, and that frustrates them a lot. Number one, and number two, they're still trying to figure out how do you get a seat at the table, because that's the first thing which they will need to do in order to do anything else that proceeds from there. So do you have any thoughts in terms of how someone can actually do that? I know it's a little contextual in terms of where they are.
Yeah, it's purely contextual, Mukesh. But I would say that, the biggest help in this journey could be trying to make sure that you are the architect of the digital agenda, so to speak, of there. So the CEO is the owner, but you're the architect. Now, if you want to be the architect, then you're going to have to make sure that that CEO gives you the position of influence in some sense over. If that is not there, then one of two things can happen. One is the company just doesn't want to embark on this agenda, and that can be for companies that we call laggard companies, people that typically tend to follow the rest of the industry in that sense of word. And I guess then you just have to wait out your time and make sure that is there. And I'll come back to this as to what a CIO could do in case you are faced with this situation. But in many cases, it is not that the company is choosing to be laggard. It's that the company has got many different challenges in that sense. There could be companies that have serious business challenges or business adversities. And obviously in that situation, being able to make sure that you understand that business adversity, take that into account, and then become the influencer of the digital agenda, I think becomes a very critical thing. So I think I would say one, understanding the business context, understanding business by itself. What are the drivers of the business? I think if the CIO wants a seat at the table, then you've got to be almost like an equally knowledgeable person about the business. Maybe some of us who have been in that role might say it's unfair. Are you going to ask a business person generally gets away saying, no, I don't understand technology and guys, help me out here. A CIO probably cannot get away saying, I don't understand business and so please help me out here. So unfortunately, that's a handicap that we are all going to have to learn with. So first, I would say just build a very good understanding of, not only the business as the way you do it, who your customers, but what is really driving the business to do well. And that is when you will be able to sort of understand what digital can do to drive it better in that sense of the word. So I would say the antidote is just better preparedness. And better preparedness in this situation means you understand the context and are able to say how digital will help either change or disrupt that concept or accelerate that in case you are in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're saying is that, in order to get the seat at the table, you need to deserve it. How you deserve it is by, number one, understanding the business, if not better than, at least as well as some of your business heads. And at the same time, understanding how technology can have significant impact on the business drivers that currently drive your business.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that actually gives us a neat segue into the next topic that I wanted to discuss. When you laid out the agenda, the CIO, emerging role of the CIO, one of the things that you spoke about was the ability to own the digital agenda and at the same time rally the troops around the digital agenda, which is what transformation is about, right? And if you understand the business context, if you understand what the business drivers are, if you understand what technology and how technology can play a role in this entire thing, you can actually build a transformative agenda for the business, right? So which means that a CIO also needs to understand how transformation works, how large scale change initiative works, right? So you've led multiple such initiatives in your previous role. So what are your learnings or what are your perspectives on what does it take to lead such a large scale transformation effort?
So one, Mukesh, I think the one thing I think we need to go back and learn a little bit was maybe in the past when we ran initiatives, we called them projects or we called them initiative as the case may be. And it generally involved many things all bunched into that one initiative and it became like a very big, important thing to do. And I think maybe if I were to reflect back and go back to it and actually dissect what we did, you actually were doing much smaller things within. And maybe in the world in which the way technology has evolved, we do not have to do these big 9, 10, 12-month initiatives, which give you results only at the end of 12 months. Digital transformation today and digital technology today has evolved to make sure that we can break these into bite-sized initiatives where there is a clear proof of concept, which you can do in relatively quicker time. maybe 2 months, 3 months or so. And then you have the rest of the time that you can scale initiatives. So I would say that the first thing I would do, one would be obviously to craft the agenda. But I think the biggest thing that you need to understand of change initiative is that unlike the past, where people were patient to see change come out of the funnel at the end of 9 months or 12 months, we need to take on board that change will have to be made bite-sized and will have to come out of the tunnel at the end of 2-3 months. Maybe the full change is not coming out at the end of 3 months. Maybe a cumulative of 4 to 3 month changes envelops a large project. But I think most CIOs will gonna have to rethink, their management of transformation by bringing it into smaller chunks. Or for that matter, even the CEOs and the boards will have to think like that. Yes, you have to spend some time creating a long-term agenda. Maybe it's an agenda that might take 18 months to 36 months, depending on the size of the company. But then you need to break it down into, achievable milestones at the end of every quarter, maybe at the end of every 4-5 months, so that people also see progress. Today's generation is all about speed, agility, etc. And one of the rules of that is that not only do you do things fast, but you also achieve certain milestones quicker, and you are able to I would say, for lack of better word, celebrate those milestone achievements in some sense of word. So people also feel a sense of progress that you're making on that. And I think I've said quite a bit on what digital run. First line, then break the problem into smaller bite-sized chunks. Okay, that people find it easy to grapple around. You can even get the troops to understand what that chunk is going to do to them. Of course, you've done the alignment to know exactly what order in which these chunks are going to come. Next, make people sort of work hard, rally the talent around you. If you don't have talent within the company, get talent from outside. Make that investment. I know the not invented here syndrome exists in all successful companies. And things like this typically tend to follow that route. Or if I bring the person from outside, they don't understand our company, they won't understand. But sometimes in these situations, you will need to have a blend of an external benchmark or external talent and internal people who understand the company, who do these projects. So you put the talent together, finish it, celebrate your success, move on. I think one other thing that maybe we didn't do in the past, because the transformation was a bit different, was that we overhauled everything. In this case, you will have to figure out how to make sure that what is considered to be keeping the lights on is considered to be always going on, and you are building on top of that. Some people are McKinsey's wording is as technology debt. The new term where people are saying that whatever you invested for so many years is more like debt, and you owe it some sort of interest. So the money it takes to keep the lights on is kind of the interest you're paying on that tech debt and all the investments we did in legacy platforms in some sense of the word. I think you will have to make sure that that is run efficiently. And in many cases, I would say that if you have the opportunity transformed, maybe one can't really transform, transaction platforms. Of course, you can make them more efficient, you can make them better, more connectable to handle the load, but you will not be able to say that, oh, I will live without a transaction platform. Whether it's in the manufacturing industry, most people call it ERPs, maybe in the banking world, it is other platforms, but every industry has their own platforms that are core to how the business records what it is doing on a daily basis. I think you will have to make sure that that core is run efficiently, that core is capable of expanding. When you see digital explosion or digital explode in the number of transactions that you are doing, but spend less and less time on that. So I think this is the way I would align priorities of large initiatives. Break them down small, make sure you celebrate success, move forward. And last but not the least, as you're going along in the alignment journey, I'm sure there'll be an important milestone in terms of being able to sort of some way calculate the kind of value you will deliver to the business. as an initiative takes forward, and maybe at the end of the project, you'll have to make sure that you will also compute that and make sure people are aware of the kind of progress you made on that, how close you came. So I think this is how large scale change initiatives are run. I'm saying the only thing additional I would add for digital initiatives would be maturity of your business process, people, and already technology needs to be taken in account when you choose the transformation. I think if you're going to make a very, very big leap of faith, then the quantum of alignment that you're going to have done prior to that would have to be very significant. If the leap of faith is moderate, then obviously you are probably in better shape to be able to deliver these initiatives in some sense of word. So keep that in mind, that you make sure what you are choosing to do. Also, what sort of technology partner you will select. If your maturity is good, you could take some extensive risk in terms of the kind of partners you go with. Much smaller companies, more nimble companies who tend to ride on almost the bleeding edge of technology in some sense of the word. Whereas if you are sort of less mature in each of these areas, then I would stick with some mainstream partners on both the technology and the implementation side, so that you get the benefit of learnings from the larger customers that they have got. And maybe it's far easier for you to deal with some of the things that come along.
Interesting. And typically you'll find that they say just like they say that all happy families are the same and all unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. Typically, challenges that you face when it comes to some of these transformation initiatives are very similar to irrespective of which organization. So what, according to you, could potential challenges or derails, things that could derail a transformation project be, and how do you tackle them?
Okay, so I think maybe we can discuss quite a few of them, but let me go with a few that I think are important. I think in today's day and age, post-pandemic area, for an organization to say that I'm going to be cautious about digital transformation, which means pretty much say I'm under investing in it. I think that to me is, the biggest risk you run from the board and the CEO, because I think that kind of risk is set and that tone is set at the very top of the organization. So I would say that that is, I think, our biggest risk in some sense of it. Not having an agenda, or having an agenda that is extremely conservative. Says, okay, I will see what my competitors are doing and then tend to do it. Or say that, look, the biggest in the industry have not done it, why should I do it? So just finding reasons why you should not embark on that journey, some sense, I would think would be an excessive caution, an excessive risk. Or I would say the biggest trap is, I don't think digital initiatives create value. So just sort of dismissing the initiative even before it has begun, before you have even attempted to understand it. I would say if you are an organization in that bucket, you're pretty much living in denial. That somehow this will all go away and we'll come back to quote unquote the normal out there. I would say that that person is in for probably the biggest and rudest shock out there. And if an entire industry is like that, then it is waiting to be disrupted by a whole bunch of more nimble, risk-taking startups who have got a lot of risk capital that is backing them in some sense of word. And for that matter, they tend to attract the talent. They build the new processes easier. So I would say there is a serious risk of excessive caution. The next, I would say, big risk would be sort of fear of the unknown. Some people say, look, mere se nahi hoga. I understand I have to embark on this journey, but I am like this, I'm like this, whatever. And they're sort of living and, oh, how will I do it? I have to deal with big technology. I don't have this, and I would say that that's fear of the unknown. Okay. They understand that there is something to be done. They know that this is a bandwagon that they cannot stay off, or a rail that they have to get onto, a train they have to get onto, but they just don't know where to begin. And I think this is a place where I think you look at peers, maybe you look at consultants or digital transformation specialists. Maybe bring them on not as employees, but as clear advisors or consultants can come in. And obviously then look at an internal assessment and external benchmarks and really arrive at what opportunities you can work on to begin this journey. So I think this inertia of startup, I would say that these two are called inertia of starting this journey. Then of course there are a couple which would be that as you take this journey, what risk you sort of get in these initiatives, kind of running like lack of focus, and the other extreme is running out of money. Okay, lack of focus means I think we created the agenda, we had a roadmap, but then we just got lost with either people from the technology world pushing you on what should be your priorities, or business really not understanding the kind of priorities you set. And so you kind of have multiple initiatives, all diffused. They make sort of a very peripheral impact on your business. And then you land up yourself into a situation where not enough value is being delivered and you are spending too much money. And so you run out of money and you have delivered less value to the company than you initially thought you could deliver. I would say that that speaks about lack of focus and running out of money. The other is there are organizations who take on this journey, do all the right things, get the right alignment, do everything, but they're just not able to attract the kind of people that should be there on the project, both internally, and if some talent is not available internally, the best resources from the outside world. They may not be able to attract the best technology partners suitable for the business or the implementation partner. So I think there is a clear lack of talent kind of issue that you can get really hit with. The other thing could be, I would say, at the risk of, this is not me at all from nature, it's just called lack of discipline in some sense of word. Yes, there is madness. There needs to be a method to that madness. You got to have regular reviews, you got to have regular progress meetings. Things need to be, we need to have KPIs, metrics, schedules, money. I mean, the digital transformation is not sort of the buzzword for mayhem and chaos. I think you need to deal with a lot of new things, but there has got to be a way of dealing with them in some sense of word. So some really old school
operational efficiencies.
Operational management of this has to be done. You need to have metrics. You need to be transparent of what change you're trying to drive, how you will drive it, and then obviously transparent about some of the challenges you face and rally the troops behind. All of that needs to be done. If you don't have discipline, then it's going to be a lot of technology for technology's sake, which is, I think, going to get you into a flywheel, a negative flywheel. Once you are in that loop, it takes a lot of gravity to bring you back into it. It's almost like Earth's gravity. If you want to escape it, you need to receive escape velocity. If you don't ever get escape velocity, then you're just stuck around the old paradigm, putting a lot of money, putting a lot of energy, not getting the results, and thus getting back into a bigger hole in some sense of word. And which comes to the last phase, which is, if for whatever reason you are there, then I think the biggest mistake you made was failure to learn. I'm sure every organization, CEO, CIO, kind of see that okay, this didn't go as well as we thought. Maybe this opportunity was not as big as we did, or maybe this was not the right technology. I think you ought to just maybe learn from that and take all your learnings completely. Obviously, you will can that project from a set of initiatives you are doing. And that should be also done relatively quickly. You can't allow it to fester so long out there. So I think you need to sort of learn. Sometimes you make the mistake which even successful organizations make, which is just fatigue, change fatigue. I mean, yes, it's a continuously evolving VUCA world, as you would call it. And I'm sure all of us as leaders stand on the stage and say, yes, we have to embrace change and we have to embrace volatility. Then please look at all of us. We are at the end of the day human beings. We like calm. We like out there. So you got to manage this fatigue also. You got to understand when the organization is kind of full up, and maybe coming and taking example from the startup world, you have mad growth, and then you have a consolidation phase where you tend to work on unit economics, and you work on making sure the right profitability, right product, people, all of that is there. You kind of have to do that same in the digital industry. There will come a time when you kind of have to in between say, hey, you know what, let's take a pause, let's regroup, let's refocus, realign, and then move forward. Now that allows the organization to catch a breath and move forward. I think the failure to learn and making sure that fatigue is not set in, I think again are sort of two sides of a single coin in some sense of the word, and you need to figure out that is there. And obviously, I think the biggest thing in this journey, and I think we cannot, I would say we cannot almost overstate it for, especially for successful companies, is going it alone, saying I know it all, I can do it all, and I know everything. I think this is not, digital transformation was never built like that. I think you will require multitude of talent, multitude of partners, people with different skills even within your company. So sort of embrace that, what shall you say, diversity, rather than trying to say that you're going to become a single kind of person, in-sourced organization that knows it all. I think that is, I think, where, of course, I talked about the going slowly problem, but just come back to that. If you are in this loop, the answer is not let's just slow down everything out there. The answer is let's regroup, let's learn from our failures, and let's get the right people into the project and move forward, rather than saying, oh, digital transformation doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't work for us, or it didn't work for us in this particular project. Maybe pick the wrong thing to go first. Maybe there was just not enough juice. So I think we need to understand why we went wrong and then regroup and move forward. So I would say it's extremely important to understand where you are in these traps. I would call them not mistakes or not call them failures, but I would call them traps. Make sure that if you ever feel that you're in one of them, you reach out to people who can help you pull yourself out.
So I remember hearing someone's call expand the word fail as first attempt in learning, and it kind of stuck with me. It's a very interesting reframe from that point of view, right? And another thing that I have kind of seen really successful organizations do is also not just learn from what they consider to be probably not successful projects or failures from that point of view, but also learn from those that went really well, and they kind of figure out whether it was pure luck or whether it went as per plan, and know when it was luck and what you could have done differently to ensure that you didn't have to be lucky in order to succeed. Also can be a good learning from that point of view.
So again, Mukesh, I would go back and talk about what was successful earlier. And I've said this on multiple platforms as a CIO. Ultimately, you need to pick well your first project. It's a beacon. If a beacon is successful, I am sure you can rally 20 people behind you. So pick well. Make sure that it is not only the most impactful project, but is also a project that is doable, or an initiative that is doable. And make sure that you deliver the value that you think you promised in some sense. So I think picking the first one or two to be high impact, very successful, best people, I think is very, very critical. So if I were a CIO, CDO, etc., I would be going to my CEO and saying, look, our life as an organization depends on this being successful. So let's put our best foot forward, and you make sure that our board is aligned, our money is allocated in the manner in which you want it, and the business heads are aligned to delivering what you want along with the tech team. And as far as the CIO is concerned, he needs to be sure, or she needs to be sure, that the partners that they've chosen on the project are as aligned as the business on delivering the project is. Because I also see a lot of challenges around that.
Yeah,
A very
I
small
think
company picks a very big partner. There is mismatch in the way people work, lands you into a situation where either you find, for successful projects in this situation, you find a good consulting owner who sort of says it's my job to become the CIO's sort of shield, and they just pull the project through. Or somebody on the business side says, hey, you know what, I'm going to smoothen out these feathers every time they came, and they push forward and happens there. So I think it's super critical to make sure that you succeed on the first two, or you make sure that the POC fails very quickly, and so that you can move on to it from learnings in some sense before everybody in the organization says that digital transformation is
doesn't work.
not for us. Doesn't work for us, or is not for us in that sense.
Yeah. So we've had this conversation now multiple times in terms of the ability for the CIO to kind of align business, align CEO, board, partners. We've spoken about how it is important for them to rally around the troops, to understand the business, blah blah blah. All of this, right? All of this at some level, I have a feeling that it leads to a shift in the mindset of the CIO in terms of how they approach work itself. And their role itself, so and their leadership style from that point of view. So any thoughts on what are some of the leadership mindsets that shifts that CIOs probably need to make in order to be able to function really well in the current circumstances, given the world we are going into?
Maybe if I look at my younger days as a CIO, and you were kind of like sometimes you acted like a gatekeeper, who gets the best laptops, and when do we buy infrastructure and those kind of things, because those were very big jobs at that point of time. Technology in the infrastructure space was going through a big transformation. But as you move forward and you looked at some of the larger projects you did, you kind of tend to realize that I think the biggest quality is that of collaboration. So I think everything that you said, and I would say that the biggest shift that I personally made as a leader would be removing the mindset that I'm a gatekeeper and saying that I'm quote unquote a collaborator or facilitator of sorts, depending on the situation. And I think making sure that that you're open to ideas, I think is the next point. So collaborator, facilitator, open to ideas in some sense. And I think those are very different qualities that you need to be able to embrace. Most of us are engineers. Most of us come from fairly fixed world, so to speak, in some sense of the word. You're going to have to embrace a little bit of volatility and a little bit of change. And I think the biggest thing that we need to pick up over time is you could be a good collaborator, good facilitator, but you got to be also a good influencer, as a good listener. So listening and influencing kind of go hand in hand in most cases. Sometimes some people are saying value nahi hai, but what they're trying to say is, well, you didn't deliver well. You said you've not been able to find the right word. So you got to listen pretty well. And then you got to be able to influence people to figure out that there is a different change agenda that you want to deliver and how you will deliver it. So I would say collaborator, facilitator, listener, and influencer. These become like four sort of traits that each of us needs to pick up. I'm sure every one of us is different, and so we will have these in different measures. But I think this old concept of a patriarchal CIO, I'm the father of all technologies, surveys, I think that needs to go very quickly in some sense of the word out there.
Interesting. So we've had multiple conversations now. You've mentioned this, the need for a CIO to be the talent magnet and the importance of having the right people within your team in order for you to be able to successfully deliver some of these technology or digital transformation projects. Now, the challenge that a lot of people tell us is that we are not Asian Paints, or we are not SAP or Accenture or whoever. So it is very difficult for us to get really good talent, because all the good talents, they either go work for some of these technology companies or the consulting companies, or some of the early adopters of organization. So what do we do? I mean, where do we get these talent from is always a constant question. So any thoughts, perspective on that?
I think the problem is, now fairly exasperated also with the pandemic. I think the good sort of tech resources, quote unquote, are even more in demand in some sense of word. You could pretty much go shopping every 3 months and increase your salary 3x by the time you end the year, if you're the right kind of tech magnet. So I would not belittle this problem. This is a very serious problem, and it is even more serious. I would say that for companies which are big, like Asian, they can attract the talent. For them, it's become bigger a challenge in some sense of word, because the quantity of talent they need and the breadth and the versatility is much more, and that is also very difficult to find. So I would say that all across, it's a big problem, and I think the only way to address it is two ways. One, obviously, or three ways. I would say one, the kind of team. So this is not a problem where you can say that I'm going to get one good person. I think the first thing is to communicate that I'm going to assemble the best team. And that's when you can recruit multiple people into your organization. So there's no way in the world one person can make all it. Yes, they can make a difference, but they can't make all the difference in some sense. So you need to be able to make sure that you communicate that you're looking for the best team. And if there are chinks in this, we are going to go get them from elsewhere. And maybe new talent only comes in hordes. So it begets other talents in some sense of the word. So you got to begin somewhere, and then you've got to be able to assemble a team. So I would say that, I think, is one. Two, you yourself as a person. I'm not a very active person on LinkedIn personally or social media or whatever. But if you're going to drive this change initiative, and you're going to have to embrace a lot of the ways of Gen Z for that matter. It's not even Gen X and Gen Y, it is now Gen Z. And maybe it'll be Zen, Z tomorrow. But I think you're going to have to change yourself to work in that world, which means you need to maybe understand what drives them and what their motivations are. And for some of that, you're going to have to participate there. It's very hard. If I was an operating CIO, I would not have such a static LinkedIn or Twitter or Insta profile, depending on the kind of role that you are looking for and looking in. A change leader is going to have to, and maybe use internal platforms. We've got Slack or Teams or other platforms for internal collaboration in some sense of word. I think the CIO, both on internal and external platforms, is going to have to play a fairly active role in espousing the views that they have. I'm saying more rather than describing people. The earlier world was that you joined an organization and left your boss. Now I think it's you join and leave an organization, but the teams you work for and the people you work with and the boss you got is kind of going to make your work experience happen end to end. So I would say that you need to deliver that full experience to an employee, just like he or she were the customer. So it's a new world. It's not an easy change to make for an individual. And obviously there is an entire milieu within the company that will have to change. I think make HR your partner in this crime, so to speak, out there. It's only good. It's not only drives change for the organization at the digital end, but drives change overall within the company. If you're a slightly older company, median age is much older, I think this kind of change will have to be done, because those are the users who are going to use some of the tech platforms and some of the digital technology that you will implement. How will you do it without espousing the cause, so to speak, in some sense of it, and become a beacon for that change? So if you are able to adopt that technology and do your job better, then I'm sure others like you would find it relatively easier to do so. So I think this is extremely critical. And obviously that money question was not without reason. Making sure that business understands that digitally literate, not, I would not say digitally literate, but digitally expert, or digital experts don't come cheap, so to speak, in some sense of word. So somewhere we'll have to align the world to saying that we need the best resources, and we're going to have to figure out a business model to pay for them, yet without disrupting the entire ecosystem of growth that you have built in the company in some sense of word. So I don't think it's an easy change, and I don't think it's an easy job to attract the best talent, but I think you're going to have to be forced to do it. And if you have the best talent, your job is even harder, because you're going to have to make sure that you can retain them in some sense of word. So I don't think, I think sometimes it's that grass is greener on the other side. So the younger CIOs just lament that, look, हमको कोई नहीं मिलता है. The older CIOs lament that, boss, हमारे लोग सब चल के जा रहे हैं. And the reality of the world is that in this world, younger people are far more risk taking, and some of your best talent is willing to become CIOs in much smaller but yet reputed companies, so to speak, who made a difference to the new world in some sense. I'm not talking only startups. I'm talking of even mid-sized companies who have risen to the challenge, made a very significant change, and developed something of a good thing going. Younger people are open to accepting some risky positions, and that is making life all the more difficult in some sense of the word for everybody.
Yeah, I think in addition to whatever you've just said, what I have seen some of the CIOs do, which actually helps them retain and attract good talent, is using public platforms to talk about the work that they are doing. If you're doing intelligent and smart work, interesting work, we've seen that the talent is willing to come and work for you, and the more you're able to do that, and the more interesting work that you do, the more interesting talent you are able to attract as well. Also reminds me of something one of my mentors said, Forrest Munshi. He used to say, process beats talent in a lot of cases. So I don't know how far that is true in this context, but his point of view was that a lot of times in a lot of organizations, transformation happened not because they completely changed their teams, but because they were able to bring in a mindset shift in the existing teams, which then brought them together in different ways, which kind of led to interesting work.
So don't take my words to say that we're getting the best talent means replacing everybody I've got in the company. That just can't happen. There is a lot of muscle memory that is part of your team. They understand the company. So I was talking more on some expert resources, some very different people. Take, for example,
data scientists,
user experience or customer experience is a big thing. And most organizations are not able to provide any career path for individuals who are experts in that. At some level, you will have to kind of get them in, parachute yourself, but then make sure that they're able to train a few people not to be as good as they are, but at least be 70% of what they are. And that 70% better is kind of par for the course. Might not be bleeding edge, but it's okay from where you are sitting today.
Yeah, at least that gives you the standing power in that space, if I may use that word.
Sure.
So we just have about 5 minutes to go. So maybe one final question that I have is that everything that we spoke about in terms of the ability to understand the business, the ability to rally people around, the ability to kind of align everyone together, the ability to attract talent. All of this, if I have to look at it, step back and look at it, it feels as if this is about driving culture and significant culture work from that point of view. Is my understanding correct? And if yes, is there some perspective that you have which you want to kind of
bang on? Yes, I would say bang on. I don't think digital transformation initiatives can succeed where the culture is risk averse or relatively slow or stayed in terms of decision making, etc., I think you will see these transformation initiatives kind of fade. I won't say they will all become failures, but they'll kind of fade in terms of the kind of impact they can make. So yes, indeed, I think the biggest, and the reason we began this talk with the CEO was that if the CEO wants to drive a culture of, I would say, making a significantly different kind of impact, fighting with the ecosystem. And we didn't talk about this at all in this entire talk, which is, ultimately organizations will not be able to ride this digital transformation wave without making sure that they fight with an ecosystem, which means your tech partners to your regular vendors to your customers. You want to have to upgrade everyone. So I think on this journey, it's all about how are you going to make sort of a different culture happen, a culture which adapts to this mindset. You look at what Asian Paints trying to do in the decor space, that's what it's about. All of us are going to have to look at how we visualize our homes, how we do things differently, and then figure out a way that the company Asian Paints or its partners can participate in the life. So that's the change. Whereas earlier it was, somebody designed and I got delivered a project in that sense world. So I think the digital transformation world will, in some way, we will have to make sure that the rest of our ecosystem also changes the lens. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to drive this change. And I would say that the cultural lens is not only about the company, but it's far bigger in some sense of word. Customers, partners, vendors, even for that matter, your some of your audit partners, your governance processes, all of that will have to be changed. You can't say that I have the governance of yesteryears and a digital organization. I think we will have to also make sure that we don't forget that behind. We're going to have to run governance even in these companies in some sense of word. How are you going to run it at that speed, at that thought, in some sense of the word, and very differently, so that you can address some of the challenges that this world will throw?
Yeah. So thanks a lot. Any final thoughts before we can conclude, Manish? We are almost at the top of the hour.
No final thoughts. I'm just saying, just let's make sure that I would only leave with the final thoughts. Make a beginning, try out a few things, create an agenda after that, and then just go about methodically doing it. There is no sort of option for any one of us. So join the journey and start.
Super. Thank you so much, Manish, for joining us and sharing your perspectives. I'm pretty sure that people will find this useful, interesting, and helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.